Hi, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining our Builder Spotlight series. Today, we have Coco and Leli joining us, the co-founders and builders of Sound AiSleep. It is an application that lets parents record audiobooks for their kids in their voice. So today, we're going to be discussing their building journey, how they went from having this idea all the way to launching in the App Store. So welcome in. And yeah, let's go ahead and get started and start talking about your journey. Before we hop into all of the details, if you could please walk us through how you came up with the idea of Sound AiSleep. What was the inspiration behind it?
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for having us. Coco and I are really excited to be here. And I think we actually had the original thought for the app already a couple of years ago when we found some research that a parent's voice is really soothing to a kid. So it's way easier for them to fall asleep if they hear the parent's voice. And back then we were already thinking, oh, it would be amazing to do an app or an audiobook platform where you can create books spoken in a parent's voice using tech for it. But back then, from a tech side, it wasn't really possible to do this in a big scale. So we kind of like parked this in the back of our minds. And now, a year ago, we were kind of stumbling up on AI voices and how good they are already. So we thought, why don't we pick this back up and see how we can get this thought of enabling audiobooks being spoken in a parent's voice using AI voice clones out there. And yeah, I would say it's been a journey ever since we said, let's have a think how we could bring this out to people and to families. But it's a year later, and I think we kind of moved somewhere.
I love this. And I love the application. I just have to say that, like, I feel like this application just kind of hits like a personal note for me. Just being a parent of an almost 1-year-old, I can definitely see how this application is helpful. So really appreciate what you both are doing to help the already busy parents out there.
And I think Coco also, like her nephews, her niece, they live abroad. So I think that was another part of the inspiration. I think for her, she was like, oh, always recording these stories while they're abroad. I think that's also kind of exactly the people who want to speak to her, like also needs for some young kid.
Yeah, exactly. It was manually recording, bedtime stories for my nieces and nephews abroad. But, now they can have any story in my voice. So
I love that, Coco. That's so true. I remember this actually resonates with something similar that I went through when my nephew was born. We would FaceTime so that I could read him books.
Oh, cute.
So yeah, it's such a great tool. And like, I know you had mentioned during one of our previous conversations for like traveling parents as well, right? Like this is something really good. That way, the kids can kind of feel like their parents are still close. So absolutely love it. Thank you so much for sharing this. And I would also love to hear more about, going back even before Sound AiSleep. Do both of you have technical backgrounds, or what is your background and how did you get into the realm of app development, more specifically for mobile?
So we actually both come from advertising. We're both the creative team. We've been working together for about 5 years, but neither of us had any technical experience like whatsoever. I mean, we had no idea what an API was this time last year. So it's been a real journey. And I think it's been a lot of kind of learning by doing for us. So kind of figuring out each problem as it comes and trying to see the way around that. But there's been, a lot of YouTube tutorials that we've watched, a lot of like Xano documentation that's been super helpful. And we've been, harassing the support team constantly with questions, and they've been amazing and super helpful. So yeah, it's been a real team effort.
That is so cool to hear. And I just want to pause right here because honestly, like this is where a lot of people start out, right? Like they have an amazing idea for an application, but not necessarily come from a technical background and are not sure how to get started. So I just want to take a quick pause right here and ask you a question and see if you have any advice for those who are just getting started, maybe have a technical background. What would you recommend as the first steps with getting started?
I think first one definitely is to not be discouraged, because I think at the beginning, we just had a look at how much getting an app made by someone else would cost you. And then we were kind of almost about to throw the idea away because we're like, okay, we cannot afford this. And it seemed kind of impossible for us to build this ourselves. So I think kind of just start somewhere, try out something. I think it was a long learning process. But first of all, like online tutorials are a good place to start. So I think just start somewhere, like test out something. Like, for example, we used Thunkable, and then we had to figure out, okay, how do we do front end, then the back end, obviously Xano. So it's kind of like a learning by doing. But I think as long as you start somewhere, you will figure things out. And then online tutorials are also having a big starting point, and ask questions. Like Coco said, like having the support team. Like I think everyone is super helpful as long as you are.
And I think also just getting the most basic version of your app. You probably have an idea in your head that's got lots of different features in there, but just stripping it back to the most simple thing and starting there is always a good place to start from.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've heard that a lot, honestly, with like app development, right? I know when we think about an app, we think about all these awesome features that it could have. But when you're building, it's really just focusing on those basics and going from there, building from there. Otherwise, I've heard that like sometimes you can end up even building items that you don't necessarily need and overcomplicating those. So
Yeah.
that is definitely great advice. Love all of the advice that you're giving us for new Xano users and new people that are just wanting to build their applications. Now, you did mention that you're using Thunkable for the front end, Xano for the back end. And I just want to dive a little bit more into that and what led to the decision of using both of these platforms.
So I think, like as Leli mentioned, we started off looking at an app developer who could build our MVP, and that was super expensive. So then we went down the kind of no-code front-end solution, because at first we thought we could build this all without like a proper backend. We were actually using Google Sheets for our backend, which like was good for a really simple part, but obviously you need a bit more. So we looked at a few front-end options, and we found Thunkable was like really affordable and it had a lot of features. It was super customizable, and it just seemed the best fit for us. So we went down that route. And then, we were using Google Sheets for a few months as the backend, and then we kind of needed something dynamic, and someone recommended Xano to us. And we started using that. Again, it was really affordable, like great UI, seemed quite simple. And
and a lot of like learning by doing on those both platforms. I think at the beginning also we just tested them out and didn't really know if they're gonna work for all our needs. But so far, I think like and a lot of friends Coco here, and like all the little details we wanted to get working in the app, like everything worked out so far. So I think we're really happy with the choices for like the platforms we chose so far.
That is amazing. It sounds like everything has worked out pretty well so far, right? I am always interested though. I'm gonna I would love some feedback here. I'm interested to hear what was the most difficult thing that you worked on, or like what was like a feature that was hard to understand in Xano and Thunkable as well, that maybe took a little bit more effort than you anticipated.
So there's one thing that stands out to me was so integrating the API with our AI partner. And honestly, this took us maybe 2 months to just do an integration, where we see on the docs it's like this integration to take around 5 minutes, like for somebody who has a lot of coding, coding knowledge. But it took us around 2 months. And it was a lot of back and forth, because I think you can't really use a tutorial for it because your app is obviously quite unique, and so nobody's really like built it in the way that you need before. There was particular struggle with converting MP3, like the raw MP3 data to the URL. But actually we had a lot of help from the Xano support team, and they helped us solve that one. But it did take a long time, I think, just because we didn't really know what we were doing because we hadn't done it before. So yeah, that one was a bit of a struggle.
Yeah, that's so interesting that you mentioned that, because sometimes with a lot of like applications, you're not necessarily dealing with files as complex as like an MP4, right? Sometimes it's just the data, it's text that can be transferred back and forth between the front end and the back end. But for this application, it does require that MP4 and then manipulating that in some way, using AI, and then sending that data back. So there is a lot of complexity that needs to be taken into account here, right? So that just kind of speaks to like the level of like building this application, and it speaks to both of you as well, like how well I've kind of mastered both of these technologies. Anything else that you would mention about that, like that complexity and like kind of making this application come to life, given that you're kind of dealing with files like MP4s and MP3s?
I think generally, like one thing Coco and I always say is that I think like at the beginning, when you start, you don't really know what you're getting into, just in the sense of once you solve one thing, another problem comes up. It's kind of this like cycle, or you solve a thing, but then something else comes up as a problem. So I think at the beginning, we just never envisioned all these little details that you need to figure out, like how things work together, like sending files back and forth, all these little nuances. We just didn't anticipate how much it's going to be. Yeah. And I think generally, again, all credits to Coco. I think she figured a lot of like the back end out. And it was a long journey from like Coco said, not knowing what an API is. But I don't know if you have any more. I think there was also like how we get the voices connected to the users, right? Like, because obviously they record their voice, it's getting sent to our AI partner. Then again, it's getting sent back. So we have saved, this is the voice for this user. I think this was maybe like the first big hurdle we had. Would you say, Coco?
Yeah.
And that was like the starting point where we were a bit like, how am I going to do that?
Yeah, I think one thing as well that we didn't really know coming into it was that we just kind of had an idea of what the app would be, but we hadn't planned out the exact screens of the user journey. And I think if we were to rebuild the app today, that's definitely where I would start. So, figuring out first exactly kind of the exact user journey and what screen should go where, and then going from there, rather than just starting and being like, okay, they'll have a login and then,
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I feel like this goes for smaller scale, bigger scale, like what you just mentioned. It applies to projects of all size. It's like sometimes you don't know what you're getting yourself into until you're actually hitting that roadblock. But that's the beauty of like learning by doing, right? Like sometimes like you wouldn't like be able to learn those concepts unless you're kind of in this roadblock where you're like, okay, now I have to figure it out. I have to like do my research, read the docs, watch a video, reach out to support. And then that's where all of that learning happens. So thank you so much for sharing that. And now I would really love to see the application. I would love to hear from both of you. What are your favorite pieces of it? What are the key features that you offer for users? So yeah, if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about the application, we would love to see it.
Yeah, of course. So it's available on the Apple App Store at the moment. We're still figuring out the Android side, but it should be available for the Play Store by the end of the year. And once you download the app, you'll open up, we have 3 onboarding screens. So just super simple. It tells you that first you record. So you record your voice directly in the app for around 2 minutes to create your voice clone instantly. And then you choose any of these, any kids book from our kids book library, and then you create your audiobook, which is spoken in your voice. So you go through the onboarding, and then the next step is to log in. So you create your account and log in, and then that will lead you to the recording screen. So we've got a little kind of sample story that's 2.5 minutes. If you like the story, you can also buy the full version once you finish creating your voice. So you do that for 2.5 minutes, and then, yeah, it's super simple. You choose a book, And then once you purchase the book, it takes around 3 to 5 minutes for your audiobook to be created. And then you'll see it appear in the My Books once it's ready, and you can play it as many times as you like once you've purchased it.
Yeah, and then obviously, just like in any other audiobook app, you click on the book, you can listen to it in your voice, you can pause it, restart it, like play it on your speakers, anything you want, really.
And you can even, one feature that we've added in that we had feedback from parents that they like to choose books that kind of promote, for example, sharing or the importance of family. So we've kind of tagged our books. Each book has around 2 themes, whether that's the importance of nature or adventure or bravery and courage. So yeah, you can choose your books that way as well if you're looking for a specific kind of category.
Yeah, and obviously we keep building our book library. So we keep adding books, and people can just see if they want to have a specific category, like Coco said, nature or adventure, anything that their kids feel like they can browse for the categories, or just go for a name of a book that they know or that looks interesting to them, because we obviously have the little images.
So cool. I absolutely love this. And it sounds like you've already taken some of your users' feedback and implemented that with the topics of the book. So that is very cool. Love to see that applications like this are listening to their users. When somebody tries the application out, is there a way that we can provide feedback, or how should we go about that?
That is actually an amazing point, because what we are doing is we are reaching out to, obviously, the first thing we did is when we launched it, we did a test round. So we just launched it to friends and family and got feedback from them. And then we also had feedback sessions where we actually sit down with people at the new step for the first time and see, are there any things that are clear? Is there anything that could be a bit smoother with the user experience? So we did this and tried to improving the app, of course. And then right now, again, we reached out to all customers that have used the app so far and asked them if they could give us a bit of feedback on things that we could improve, things that they've missed, features that they would have liked to be added. But I think you're saying something that is very true. We should also add it into the app. So that's an amazing point. I think we obviously have customer support, but we don't really have a feedback option in the app yet. It's more that we reach out to people. But now that you said it, it makes total sense to add this into our the next version of our app, saying kind of any feedback, click here. So already improved. Thank you.
Love it. And I think the key word there is yet, right? It's not available yet. So make sure your eyes open for that. Thank you so much, Leli. And I know you mentioned that you're in the App Store, which is incredibly exciting. Could you describe what that journey was like, right? Getting your application into the App Store. Were there any key moments where you were maybe ready and then had to go back and do something? Or would just love to hear a little bit about that story into that launching phase.
So the app review is
a long story.
Yeah, I think, how many times did we get rejected, would you say? Maybe 20?
50. There you see how different our guessing is. Yeah, 50 is maybe an exaggeration, but a lot of times. I think because we obviously I guess one issue we kept running into is that we are an app for kids, but the parents use it because the parents record their voice. And Apple kept messaging us saying, oh, you cannot have a microphone function in a kid's app. And we were saying to Apple, oh, okay, but it's for the parents to use. And then they said, okay, can you make it clear that it's for the parents? So we added all the wording in there where it's very, very clear it's for parents. But then they kept coming back being it's not clear enough, and we need to get we need to build in parent gate, things like this. So I think this was the biggest hang up we had, the microphone of the kids app. But there were many little things where they said this isn't correct, or lots of little things. But I think once we solved the microphone issue, from that it was quite easy. And now that we've made it once, it's way easier to get it approved. So I think the first hurdle is big, But now every time we update the versions, it's not as difficult anymore. I do have to say, like, I think once we also like published the wrong version. Luckily, that was kind of at the beginning stage where we were only launching to friends and family. But it's like, I think the publishing is like, it's a bit tricky. It seems simple, but even once you solve all these little issues, things can still slightly go wrong, like publishing the wrong version and then something doesn't work and it takes you a couple of days to realize. So
yeah, and I think from what we've heard, a lot of people struggle with the Apple, like the App Store review process. I think a lot of apps, it takes a lot of time to get successfully published on there. So good to know for us.
Yeah, absolutely. This totally reminds me of just like, those stories that you hear of like, was it like Michael Jordan like getting rejected from like his basketball team in high school, or like Disney, like the cartoons in the newspaper like being rejected. So I feel like, and this is totally, one of those success stories that's like you had to jump so many hurdles, but you were able to make finish lines.
That's such a nice comparison. I'm like, okay, if you want to compare it to Michael Jordan, go for it.
I'll take it.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Awesome. Well, really, really appreciate sharing with us about like your history with this, your background, how you kind of went through, came up with the idea, and then your journey into building and launching this. I am curious to hear about any future developments and what we can expect from Sound AiSleep. If there's anything that you can share, I will say that.
Yes, we've got a few things we're looking at. I mean, the app is very much focused around personalization of stories. So we're looking at how we can personalize further in like new features that are coming. Maybe, your child features in these stories. Maybe there's stories that, they specifically feel like hearing that night. So we're looking into more personalization, I would say, is kind of the next thing in the pipeline.
I think generally, of course, like improving the app, like we're still at the stage where we are looking very much for like customer feedback, where we can make the user journey smoother. And then like Coco said, ways to make it even more personalized, like maybe getting people's names and like making the stories just like a little bit more personalized overall. Then we're also looking for like, more like in-depth features where how can we make it even more shareable within families? How can we just like, enable people to maybe it's not only the parents, maybe they want also like a grandparent's voice. So we're obviously just seeing how can we bring even more of the family together in our app. But I think first stage would just be like getting it into a very like seamless user experience. Yeah. And then obviously like launching to the Google Play Store. It's also Mac. So there's lots of little things that are already in the pipeline. And then some other ones that we're more thinking about and need to do the second step.
Absolutely. This is all so exciting, and I cannot wait just to see how this all evolves. I know you already mentioned where users can download the application, but just in case anybody missed it and wants to go in and try it out, would you mind just telling the audience where they can get the app, and then if there are any questions, how they can get in contact with you or support?
Yeah, of course. So the app is available to download on the App Store. It's called Sound AiSleep. It's spelled like AI sleep. And we'd love to also offer a free audiobook for anybody who wants to try it out. So if you go in the promotions page and apply the promo code FREEBOOK2024, all in capitals, you can try your first audiobook for free. We'd love to hear like any thoughts you have, any feedback on it. You can send Leli and I an email at info@soundaisleep.com.
That, but also maybe by the time you download it, we already have a version where we can give feedback straight away. So I think, we try to get that in because it's such a good point.
Thank you so much again, Coco and Leli, for joining us. And I hope that you
Thanks so much for having us.
Yes,
absolutely. We look forward to updates and we'll stay in contact.
Yes, please.
We definitely do. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.